Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to Audio Map. Today we're looking at part 4 of our mixing series, the first stage of the mix, which is known as the static mix. So in this stage, we're almost entirely going to be working without plugins, and our goal is to get the best possible mix we can of all of these tracks only by adjusting their faders directly. So we won't be working with any of the buses. We may do something with a couple plugins at the end, but the majority of this stage is taking these tracks and pretending we could only get a mix by adjusting these faders. This was the only tool we had at our disposal. What is the best possible mix we can get out of that? And then we'll move on from there with the next video into stage 2. But this is a really important stage of the mixing process. This is the foundation for the rest of our mix. So it's important to take a little bit of time here and get it as good as we reasonably can. In the last video, I forgot to actually adjust these to send to this parallel track. So now they're sent there, but we have the parallel track muted and the other parallel track muted for now, because right now we're just adjusting the faders. We're not worrying about dynamic processing. Okay, so before we start mixing, I just want to go briefly over the audio settings that I'll be using. So because we're mixing and we're not recording, I'm just going to put it at a full 1024 IO buffer size. This just gives us the least possible risk of having any dropouts while we're working in the session. And even though it increases latency, it's not a big deal when we're not recording. I'm going to leave it at automatic. There's no plugins on right now. It could be possible that we'd need to change it at some point if we had a really, really busy session, but I've been mixing some of my personal projects and I haven't had to change this from automatic, which, by the way, seems to exclusively be doing 4 high performance cores for me and then leaving all of the 4 efficiency cores of this system off, which is good because then those efficiency cores, can power the interface, can allow me to go do other stuff on my computer while, if I need to briefly. So I'm just leaving it on automatic for now. I want to change this to large. This just gives us more potential performance now that we're going to need it right now. And then we could change this to playback track since we're not recording anything. So playback. But the settings as they were by default, if we had just left them at 512, automatic, medium, and playback and live, would have been fine. This is just getting slightly better performance for Logic in general for a mix session. So now that you guys are aware, I'll do a longer video on these settings later on, but that's a good kind of just intro settings for a mix. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. Close that. And now we're going to start mixing this. Now, before I actually start, I want to show you guys how we mix in mono. So I do most of my mixing in mono, and I'll go in much greater detail in that in another video, in a more in-depth video. But suffice it to say that mixing in mono is the most important thing I've found to getting a really consistent, compelling mixes that work both in mono and in stereo. So part of the idea is that we mix it in mono first, and by doing so, we kind of handle the worst case scenario, right? So in mono, we lose all the stereo information. All the things that are panned fully left or right get a lot quieter in the mix. So if your mix falls apart in mono, then there's a lot of real-world listening situations where your mix isn't going to sound very good. So we want to make sure our mix sounds good in mono. And then I kind of do the reverse of what a lot of mixing engineers I've heard say to do. So they'll be mixing in stereo and they'll check their mix in mono. I prefer to mix in mono and then check my mix in stereo from time to time. And then certain stages of the mixing process, we'll switch back to stereo for varying lengths of time for a specific processing. But for now, if you're just working out of stock plugins, you can go ahead and open up Utility Gain. And on the Gain plugin, you can turn mono on. So that will allow you to mix entirely in mono. So we'll just go ahead and start with that. So I'm actually going to use a plugin from Goodhertz. And don't worry if you don't have this. This is why I just showed you how to do it with a Logic stock plugin. But I have this thing from Goodhertz called Can Opener Studio 3. So this basically allows me to use a crossfeed algorithm to simulate the effect of speakers in my headphones. It has a lot of other useful features too, but for the purposes of this right now, I'm turning it on so I can turn on mono. So there we go. And I bet you we can have, I used to leave high quality mode off because on my MacBook Pro, I'd often be getting really hot really loud fan noises while mixing, so I try to reduce my CPU usage as much as possible. But from all my mixing on this machine so far, it's not getting hot, and there's no fan to speak of, and I'm not using up nearly that much of the CPU. So I think we can just put high quality mode on this and not have an issue. Okay, let's get started. So I like to start with everything at -10 just so I can hear everything kind of quiet, and then I start bringing faders up to taste over time. So the drums are actually kind of distracting me right now. I want to get everything else set first. So I sometimes will mute certain things while I'm getting stuff set up.
I said I'm looking for something out of sight. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you'll be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. I let it go, I wasn't right. I was up thinking all night, I know I'm alright. And I was sitting in starlight, the stars said what's wrong. Said I'm looking for something out of sight. I let it go into the night. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. I let it go, I wasn't right. I said I'm looking for something out of sight. I let it go into the night.
Okay, so still need to adjust these a lot more before we check the stereo sound. So I'm gonna go through another pass right now.
I was holding you all night, you know you're alright. And I was wishing on starlight, the stars said, will that be all? I said I'm looking for something out of sight.
Okay, so I think we're getting a fairly decent starting mix going. So I'm actually going to turn it back to stereo now. And go ahead and listen again, and this time I'm going to pan things as I'm listening.
I was holding you all night, you know you're all right.
Actually, I usually like the hi-hat
Starlight, the stars
on the right. So I'm just going to go ahead and flip that.
said I'm looking for something out of sight.
So it's not like I won't use plugins right now. That's just not the point of this part. It's not the focus.
Say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged.
And part of the reason I want the hi-hat on the right is so now my piano, particularly if we listen to the piano solo for a second. The high notes on the piano, the right hand, are coming out on the right a little bit. So even though we do have the bass coming down in the left, I feel like the piano, especially if you add it with this high right hand, we're getting like a right feeling kind of part. And the bass is ultimately, I'm going to center it anyways. So I'm going to reduce the stereo width on the bass and the bass frequencies. So if you take these guys and the hi-hat, right now, why is the hi-hat playing? I guess not the hi-hat here, the crash. We have a little bit of a right balanced mix. So then in the first chorus, I only have one of the violins, so I can turn that on and pan it left, and we've got a fairly balanced stereo image for this first chorus. And then in the next chorus, I'm going to turn both strings on, and then we'll have kind of the complete picture here.
Say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules.
But let's go back a bit.
Said I'm looking for something
Yeah.
out of
So I'm not doing a lot of panning in the verses. There's not as much information even to pan. But then by having a more narrow verse, I can open it up for the choruses.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged.
Which brings us to these guys. Probably just want to pan them all fully wide. Let's see, this is left and right. This one is, what is that? This is a dub. So this one I'll probably leave in the center. This is left and right. Left and right. And then this guy, I'll go pan when I get to him.
Say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. I let it go, I wasn't right. I said I'm looking for something out of sight. I let it go into the night.
Okay, now I'm gonna do another pass in mono. And the reason I'm doing this, panning this all the way to the left and turning this off, is I'm actually turning on, I have a single mono speaker that I like to mix my mono parts of my mix in. So it's just, basically I have sound coming out of one speaker, and I have that plugged into the left channel on my interface. So I'm just routing this to the left, so that way I'm getting the full mono image coming out of that speaker. But you guys don't really need to worry about that.
I was holding you all night, you know you're starlight, the star said, will that be all? I said, I'm looking for something out of sight. I let it go into the night. They say life's a game, well then I'll play. They say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. They say life's a joke, well then I say, laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. I let it go, I wasn't right. I was up thinking all night, I know I'm alright. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say, laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. I let it go, I wasn't right. I said I'm looking for something out of sight. I let it go. I said I'm looking for something out of sight. I let it go into the night.
Okay, so it's starting to come together. Obviously, it's too dynamic. So in some parts, the vocal might be too loud, in other parts, it's too quiet, or the same with the strings or other parts. But I think we've got a generally good balance. So the one other thing I want to do right now is just to go look at my buses and see how loud it's coming in here. And if it's too quiet or too loud, then I'll go adjust the tracks for that section. And however much I adjust them up or down, I'll do the inverse on the buses. So I'll just play a section of the song and do that real quick. So I like where the lead vocal is. Backing vocals are a little quiet, so I'm gonna turn them up and then turn this down. And that was too much, so I'm gonna turn it back a bit. The strings are a little quiet. It's still pretty quiet. So I turned them up by how much? I already forgot. 8. Keys look good. And if you missed the previous video where I talk about gain staging, we just roughly want every meter in the whole song to be around halfway to maybe up to around a quarter of the meter. If we're in that range average, then we're going to get good plugin performance for any analog based plugins or analog emulated plugins. And then the bass seems like it could be a bit louder. Okay, and the drums. Drums look good, instrumental looks good, vocals look good. This is a little loud, so I might turn these guys down a little. Alright, now our whole mix is sitting at a better average volume for right now. Okay, and that kind of wraps it up. We've got a good rough mix, or a good static mix. We've got some basic panning going on, which, you know, we'll adjust. We'll go into more detail. You'll notice that I was using lots of kind of larger values as I was adjusting things. And that's because the mix is in a real rough state right now, right? Adjusting, I mean, individual tracks are too dynamic. So in some parts they're too loud, in some parts they're too quiet. You can't really get everything perfectly balanced right now. But we've got a good overall balance to start. So for our next session, we'll go over mix bus processing. So we're gonna throw a few different plugins on our mix bus so where every track is being routed to, and go ahead and kind of paint our mix with some broad brush strokes, some EQ, some compression, some saturation, to just get the mix much, much closer to the goal without doing that much processing at all. So make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos in this mixing series or on the M1 Mac Performance. Okay, that wraps it up. See you guys in the next one. Thanks.